Welcome to the channel. Enjoy listening to the story of young black mother fights for her preemie's life. What happened next changed community forever. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories and write where you are listening to this story from. Here we go. The fluorescent lights of the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit cast a harsh, sterile glow on Nia Thompson's exhausted face. Her fingers, trembling slightly, traced the delicate outline of her premature son's hand, so tiny it could barely wrap around her pinky. Isaiah weighed just 2 pounds 3 ounces, a fragile bundle of hope fighting for survival against impossible odds. Nia remembered the day she'd first dreamed of becoming a doctor. It was during her sophomore year at Howard University, when a passionate lecture on community health had ignited something deep within her. She had seen medicine as more than a career. It was a calling, a way to bridge the gaps she'd witnessed growing up in a neighborhood where healthcare was often a luxury few could afford. But life had other plans. A sudden pregnancy, financial pressures, and the unexpected early arrival of Isaiah had forced her to interrupt her medical studies. The dream of wearing a white coat and making a difference seemed to slip away with each passing month. Now she was here, not as a future doctor, but as a mother fighting for her son's survival.
He's small, but he's strong,
whispered Ms. Robinson, the night nurse who had become Nia's unexpected lifeline. The older black woman's hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting Isaiah's monitors and checking his vital signs. Nia nodded, her eyes never leaving her son. The incubator, a transparent barrier between her and Isaiah, felt like both a protection and a punishment. Medical equipment beeped rhythmically, a constant reminder of how precarious his existence was.
the kangaroo method.
Ms. Robinson said softly, breaking through Nia's thoughts.
It'll help him. Skin-to-skin contact. It's not just about warmth, it's about connection.
She helped Nia carefully position Isaiah against her chest, his tiny body barely covering the span of her hand. The hospital's resources were minimal. Outdated equipment, overcrowded rooms, nurses working double shifts. Each piece of machinery looked like it had seen better days, a stark reflection of the underfunded healthcare system that served predominantly black communities. The first signs of Isaiah's complications had emerged quickly: respiratory challenges, potential developmental risks, the constant threat of infections. Each medical challenge felt like another obstacle in a system that seemed designed to work against her.
How am I going to do this?
Nia whispered, more to herself than to Miss Robinson. Her voice cracked, a mixture of fear and determination bleeding through. Mr. Robinson's hand squeezed her shoulder.
A breath at a time, baby. One breath at a time.
The room around them told a story of systemic neglect. Worn tiles, peeling paint near the corners, equipment that looked like it had been donated from some long-forgotten medical surplus. Yet within this imperfect space, a profound connection was forming, a mother's love creating a force more powerful than any institutional barrier. Nia thought about her interrupted medical education, about the dreams she'd put on hold. But looking at Isaiah, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, she realized her education wasn't over. It was just beginning, in a way she could never have anticipated. The incubator hummed. Monitors beeped, and in that moment, Nia understood that her greatest lesson would be learning to fight for her son, for herself, and for every other mother facing similar impossible odds. Her journey of survival and resistance was just beginning. The fluorescent kitchen light flickered, casting harsh shadows across Nia's exhausted face. Isaiah's soft breathing from the makeshift nursery, a converted corner of her tiny one-bedroom apartment, was the only sound breaking the silence of early morning. 2 months had passed since his premature birth, and every day felt like a battle against impossible odds. Nia's fingers traced the medical bills spread across the kitchen table. Each paper was a stark reminder of the financial chasm threatening to swallow her entire existence. Her medical school dream seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the immediate reality of survival, her own and Isaiah's. The clock read 5:37 a.m. She had exactly 23 minutes before she needed to prepare for her part-time job at the local convenience store. Sleep was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her eyes, rimmed with dark circles, darted between Isaiah's medical equipment and the stack of job applications she'd been filling out.
Just hold on, baby,
she whispered, checking Isaiah's oxygen monitor. The device had become her lifeline, a constant companion that translated her son's fragile existence into numbers and graphs. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance of necessity. Sterilize bottles, prepare Isaiah's specialized formula, check his temperature, change his diaper, pump breast milk, pack her work bag, dress Isaiah for the daycare that would watch him during her shift. Each movement was calculated, each second precious. As Robinson's words from the hospital echoed in her mind.
You're stronger than you know, Nia. This baby needs you to be strong.
At the daycare, run by a compassionate older woman named Miss Greta in the same low-income neighborhood, Nia's interactions were always tinged with an underlying tension. The other mothers, some single, some struggling, all fighting their own battles, would glance at her with a mixture of sympathy and judgment.
You look tired, honey,
Miss Greta would say, her weathered hands gently adjusting Isaiah's blanket. Tired wasn't even the beginning of it. Exhaustion had become Nia's constant companion, more reliable than any human relationship she'd known recently. The convenience store job was mind-numbing. Stocking shelves, managing the cash register, dealing with occasional difficult customers. Each moment was a test of her patience. Her mind would constantly drift to Isaiah, wondering if he was eating properly, if his breathing was stable. During her lunch break, she would make quick calls to check on him, her fingers trembling slightly each time she dialed the daycare number.
Everything's fine, Miss Thompson.
Mrs. Greta would reassure her, but fine was a relative term in Nia's world. The threat of losing Isaiah loomed large. Social services had already made preliminary inquiries. A young, single mother working part-time, living in a modest apartment. The system was primed to see her as a potential risk to her child, rather than a devoted mother, fighting against impossible circumstances. Her interactions with social workers were always fraught with underlying racial tensions. Questions seemed loaded. Looks seemed judgmental. Nia knew the statistics. Black mothers were more likely to have their children removed, more likely to be seen as incapable.
I will not become a statistic,
she would whisper to herself, a mantra of resistance. By the time she returned home each evening, her body ached. But the moment she held Isaiah, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, everything else disappeared. His survival was a daily miracle, a testament to her love and determination. The kangaroo method she'd learned in the hospital became her primary source of comfort and healing. Skin-to-skin contact that seemed to breathe life into both of them. In those moments, pressed against each other, Nia would dream of a different future, of providing care for mothers and babies who looked like her. Her small apartment became a battlefield and a sanctuary. Medical textbooks purchased secondhand were stacked alongside baby bottles, a visual representation of her interrupted journey and her current reality. As night fell and Isaiah slept, Nia would sit by the window, watching the urban landscape of her neighborhood, a terrain of survival, resilience, and unspoken struggles. She knew her fight was just beginning, but she was determined to write a different narrative for herself, for Isaiah, for every mother who had ever been told she wasn't enough. The fluorescent lights of the bus station flickered, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Nia clutched her worn messenger bag, Isaiah's medical blanket draped carefully over her shoulder to protect him from the harsh winter chill. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, dark circles etched beneath them like permanent bruises of sleepless nights and endless worry. She hadn't planned to be here. The day had been a marathon of challenges. Another appointment, another set of medical bills, another reminder of how fragile everything felt. Isaiah, nestled against her chest in a makeshift sling, was quiet. Too quiet. The weight of her son felt both like a blessing and a burden.
You look like you're carrying the world.
A gravelly voice broke through her thoughts. Nia looked up, startled. An older man sat nearby, his weathered hands clasped around a styrofoam coffee cup. His clothes were layers of worn fabric, as testament to nights spent navigating the unforgiving streets. But his eyes, they were sharp, intelligent, carrying a depth that spoke of experiences far beyond his current circumstances.
Excuse me?
She responded instinctively, pulling Isaiah closer. The man smiled, a gesture that seemed to hold both wisdom and profound sadness.
I've seen that look before, the look of someone fighting a battle most people don't even recognize exists.
Something in his tone made Nia pause. It wasn't pity, it was recognition.
My name's Marcus,
he said, gesturing to the empty space beside him.
Mind if I share a bit of my story?
Nia hesitated. Years of survival had taught her caution, but something in Marcus's eyes, a kindness, a understanding, made her sit down, unmaintaining a careful distance.
I was a social worker.
Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of memory.
15 years with the city, working in community outreach, saw firsthand how systems are designed to break people, especially black families.
He spoke about institutional racism not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. How budget cuts, bureaucratic indifference, and systemic neglect transformed lives into statistical casualties. How he'd watched families torn apart, not by individual failures, but by structural design.
Your son.
Marcus nodded towards Isaiah.
He's fighting a battle most people won't understand. Premature black babies, they're statistics before they're even given a chance.
Nia felt a surge of protective energy.
He's more than a statistic. He's my everything.
Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
The system won't give you what you need. You'll have to take it. Document everything. Every interaction, every medical record, every conversation. Create your own evidence.
He pulled a worn notebook from his jacket, scribbled something, and tore out a page. Phone numbers, resources, contacts for legal aid, community health advocates, support groups for mothers of premature infants.
Knowledge is your weapon,
Marcus said.
They expect you to be overwhelmed, to give up. Don't.
The conversation lasted perhaps 20 minutes, but for Nia, it felt like a lifetime of understanding condensed into moments. Here was someone who saw her, truly saw her. Not as a struggling young mother, but as a warrior. When Marcus stood to leave, he touched Isaiah's blanket briefly.
Yeah, it's going to be something special,
He said, not a platitude but a statement of absolute certainty. As he walked away, merging into the bus station's anonymous crowd, Nia realized something had shifted. Her fear hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed, transmuted into something more powerful. Determination. She looked down at Isaiah, his tiny chest rising and falling.
We're going to be okay.
She whispered, not a hope, a promise. The notebook Marcus gave her felt heavy in her hand, a map, a weapon, a beginning. Her fight was just starting. The fluorescent lights of their cramped one-bedroom apartment flickered as Nia stared at the eviction notice, her fingers trembling. Isaiah's soft whimpers from the makeshift medical corner pulled her attention away from the threatening document. $250. $250 stood between them and homelessness. Her eyes drifted to the stack of medical bills, each one a testament to Isaiah's fragile existence. The specialized formula, the extra medical supplies, the medications. They were bleeding her dry. Her part-time job at the convenience store barely covered their basic needs, let alone these mounting expenses.
We're gonna be okay.
Nia whispered, more to herself than to Isaiah. Her hand instinctively reached for the kangaroo care wrap, pulling her son close. His premature body, still so delicate, nestled against her chest, a living reminder of her resilience. The knock at the door startled her. Nia's heart raced. Landlord? Social services? Another bill collector? A young woman with a press badge stood outside.
Nia Thompson.
The journalist's eyes swept the modest apartment, taking in the medical equipment, the carefully organized space that spoke of both struggle and determination.
I'm Rachel Martinez from the City Chronicle. We heard about your story.
Nia hesitated. Miss Robinson, the night nurse who had become her confidant, had warned her about media attention.
Be careful.
She had said.
They'll want your story, but they rarely want real change.
But desperation has its own logic. The interview unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Rachel asked about Isaiah's birth, about Nia's interrupted medical education, about the systemic challenges she faced. Nia chose her words carefully, revealing enough to illuminate the broader issues without completely exposing her vulnerability.
The prematurity unit at Memorial Hospital is underfunded.
Nia explained, her voice steady.
And it's not just about equipment. It's about understanding, about seeing Black mothers as more than statistics.
Rachel's pen moved furiously across her notebook. The story would run, Nia knew, a brief moment of visibility, a fleeting spotlight on a system designed to make survival difficult. But systems rarely change with a single story. That night, after the journalist left, Isaiah spiked a fever. The familiar terror gripped Nia, a visceral reminder of how precarious their existence was. She remembered the homeless man's words from their previous encounter.
Your fight is bigger than just survival, it's about changing the narrative.
As she administered Isaiah's medication, her mind drifted to her interrupted medical education. One day, she promised herself, she would complete her studies. She would become the change she needed to see. The media attention came and went like a summer storm, intense, brief, ultimately inconsequential. No systemic changes materialized, no sudden influx of resources appeared, just Nia, Isaiah, and their continued fight. When Isaiah's fever broke 2 days later, Nia allowed herself a moment of relief. Her fingers traced the medical textbook she'd been studying during late-night feeding sessions. Knowledge, she was learning, was its own form of resistance. The eviction notice remained on the table, a constant reminder that their battle was far from over. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Another black mother's struggle reduced to a footnote in a newspaper, another system remaining unchanged. But inside their small apartment, something profound was brewing. Resilience, hope, the quiet, revolutionary act of survival. Nia looked down at Isaiah, who had fallen asleep against her chest.
"We're gonna be okay."
She whispered again. This time, she almost believed it. The fluorescent lights of the public library cast a harsh glare on the legal reference books spread before Nia. Her fingers traced the edges of dusty volumes, searching for something, anything, that might give her an edge in her ongoing battle for survival. Isaiah slept peacefully in his portable carrier beside her, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Weeks of frustration had taught Nia one crucial lesson. Knowledge was her most potent weapon. The conversation with Marcus at the bus station echoed in her mind. Document everything, understand the system, find its weaknesses. A yellowed legal volume caught her attention. It was an outdated text on housing rights and child welfare, but something about its worn pages spoke to her. She carefully opened it, mindful of Isaiah's sleep, her eyes scanning the dense text with an intensity born of desperation.
"Mama's gonna figure this out."
She whispered, more to herself than to her sleeping son. The library had become her sanctuary, a place of quiet research and momentary respite from the constant struggle. Her part-time job at the convenience store barely covered their basic needs, and the threat of eviction hung over them like a persistent storm cloud. But here, surrounded by books and possibility, Nia felt a spark of something powerful. Hope. A soft clearing of throat interrupted her concentration. She looked up to see an elderly librarian watching her with a mixture of curiosity and compassion.
"You've been here quite a while.
The woman said, her voice gentle.
Can I help you find something?"
Nia hesitated, then decided to be direct.
"I'm looking for information about tenant rights, especially for single mothers with medical challenges."
The librarian, her name tag read Margaret, pulled up a chair.
"I've seen you here before. Your son is beautiful."
Isaiah stirred slightly, and Nia instinctively reached out to adjust his blanket. The movement was so natural, so maternal, that Margaret smiled.
"I used to work in social services."
Margaret continued.
"Before retirement. If you're willing to talk, I might be able to point you in the right direction."
It was another unexpected connection, another moment of potential support that seemed to materialize just when Nia needed it most. She thought about Marcus, the homeless man who had offered wisdom at the bus station, and now Margaret, strangers offering fragments of hope. Over the next hour, Margaret helped Nia navigate complex legal documents. They discovered a little-known clause about medical hardship that could potentially delay eviction proceedings. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was something.
"The system isn't designed to make things easy."
Margaret said, her voice tinged with both wisdom and frustration.
"But it can be navigated if you know where to look."
As the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the library's reading room, Nia felt a transformation happening. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was strategizing, learning, preparing to fight. Her phone buzzed, a text from Miss Robinson, the nurse from the NICU, who had become an unexpected ally. "How are you holding up?" the message read. Nia typed back, "Getting stronger, finding my way." The day's research had yielded more than legal insights. It had reinforced something fundamental. Her determination was her most powerful resource. The medical challenges Isaiah faced, the financial pressures, the systemic barriers, they were formidable. But Nia was learning to see them not as insurmountable walls, but as challenges to be strategically approached. As she packed up her research, carefully lifting Isaiah's carrier, she caught her reflection in a nearby window. The woman looking back was tired but resolute, no longer just a young mother struggling to survive, but a woman building a strategy for resilience.
"We've got this,"
she whispered to Isaiah, who opened his eyes and gave her the briefest of smiles. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. But inside Nia, something was changing. A quiet revolution of knowledge, love, and unwavering determination. The morning light filtered through the worn curtains of Nia's small apartment, casting a soft glow on Isaiah's face. His breathing had become steadier, less labored, a subtle but significant change that sent a wave of hope through Nia's exhausted body. She traced her finger along his tiny hand, marveling at the strength of this small being who had fought so hard to survive. The past months had been a relentless battle. Each day was a testament to her determination, a constant negotiation between survival and hope. Isaiah's health had been a delicate balance, teetering between critical moments and small victories. Today felt different. There was a newfound stability in his condition that whispered of resilience. Nia's mind drifted to the conversation she'd been having with herself for weeks. Nursing school. The idea had germinated slowly, like a seed pushing through hard-packed earth. It wasn't just about a career anymore. It was about creating a path of understanding, of change.
"We're gonna do this,"
she murmured to Isaiah, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and resolve.
"We're gonna make a difference."
The knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Nia carefully adjusted Isaiah in his makeshift nest of blankets before answering. The familiar face of Marcus, the homeless man who had become an unexpected mentor, greeted her.
"How's my little fighter?"
Marcus asked, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. Nia stepped back, allowing him to enter. The small apartment was a testament to her struggle. Medical papers scattered on a worn table, Isaiah's medical equipment carefully arranged, photographs of her family hanging on the wall like a map of resilience.
"He's getting stronger."
Nia replied, her voice carrying a newfound confidence.
"The doctors say his lung capacity is improving."
Oh, Marcus nodded, his eyes taking in the transformation. The woman who had once seemed defeated now radiated a quiet strength. He remembered their first encounter at the bus station, her desperation palpable. Now, something had changed.
"I've been thinking about nursing school."
Nia said, almost tentatively.
"And no, it won't be easy. Part-time work, taking care of Isaiah, studying. It sounds impossible."
Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm.
"Nothing worth doing is ever easy, young lady. You've already proven that."
The conversation meandered through practical considerations: financial aid, part-time study options, childcare arrangements. Each topic was a small battle plan in Nia's larger war against a system that had consistently undervalued her.
"The healthcare system needs people like you,"
Marcus said.
"people who understand what it means to fight from the margins, people who know that healing is more than just medical procedures."
Nia thought about the nurses who had supported her. Miss Robinson, who had taught her the kangaroo method, the unnamed healthcare workers who had shown compassion when the system seemed indifferent. She wanted to be that lifeline for someone else. As the day progressed, Nia began filling out nursing school applications. Each form was an act of defiance against poverty, against systemic racism, against the narrative that had been written for her. Isaiah watched from his small bed, his eyes bright with a curiosity that seemed beyond his months.
What day?
Nia whispered, more to herself than to her son.
We'll change things, not just survive, but create space for others to survive too.
The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the room. Isaiah's steady breathing became a rhythm of hope, a soundtrack to Nia's growing determination. She was no longer just surviving. She was preparing to fight, to heal, to transform. The municipal building loomed like a concrete fortress, its gray walls a stark metaphor for the bureaucratic indifference Nia had come to know intimately. She clutched a folder of documents, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes burning with determination. Isaiah was strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier, his tiny breaths a constant reminder of what was at stake. The receptionist's eyes flickered over Nia with a mixture of disinterest and mild annoyance. Another black woman with another complaint, her expression seemed to say. Nia had learned to read these microaggressions like a second language.
I'm here to submit additional documentation regarding the proposed closure of the prematurity unit.
Nia said, her voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. Just yesterday, Marcus? The homeless man, who had become an unexpected mentor, had helped her craft a more compelling appeal. He understood systemic barriers in a way few others did, having navigated the margins of society for years.
Documentation is your weapon.
He told her.
Make them see you, make them hear you.
The appeal was a carefully constructed narrative, not just a dry list of complaints, but a human story. Nia detailed the lives that would be impacted: premature infants who would lose critical care, mothers who would be left without support, the long-term health consequences of dismantling a crucial medical resource. As she waited, Isaiah stirred against her chest. His presence was a constant reminder of why she was fighting. Each breath he took was a testament to the importance of specialized medical care, of believing in possibility when the system seemed designed to extinguish hope. A middle-aged white administrator emerged, his posture suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else.
Miss Thompson,
he said, more a statement than a greeting.
Mr. Reynolds?
Nia responded, matching his tone with a professional coolness she'd cultivated through countless interactions. He reviewed her documents, his fingers moving mechanically, his eyes betraying nothing. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making the interaction feel almost theatrical, a performance of bureaucratic indifference.
we've reviewed your concerns.
He said finally.
The decision regarding the prematurity unit stands. Budget constraints are...
Budget constraints?
Nia interrupted, her voice rising.
These aren't just numbers, these are lives. My son's life was saved in that unit.
Marcus's coaching echoed in her mind. Stay calm, be strategic, make them uncomfortable with the truth. Mr. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a young black woman who refused to be dismissed. A local journalist Nia had cultivated a relationship with, Rachel, had promised to run a story. But Nia knew media attention was fleeting. Real change required persistent, strategic action.
We'll look into your request.
Mr. Reynolds said finally, a bureaucratic non-commitment that meant nothing and everything. But Nia had discovered a procedural loophole. a technical requirement in municipal health regulations that could temporarily halt the closure. It wasn't a victory, but it was a pause, a moment to breathe, a moment to strategize. As she left the building, the weight of Isaiah against her chest felt like both a burden and a shield, a living reminder of why she continued to fight. The street outside was busy, indifferent to her small victory. Cars rushed by, people hurried past, but Nia stood still for a moment, feeling the rhythm of her son's breathing, understanding that every small resistance was a form of revolution. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Keep pushing. They're not used to people like you who won't back down." Nia smiled. Not a smile of triumph, but of determination. This was just one battle in a long war. The prematurity unit would not close, not on her watch. The fluorescent lights of the municipal health department's conference room cast a harsh, unforgiving glow on Nia's determined face. Her hands trembled slightly, clutching a folder filled with meticulously collected documentation, medical records, personal testimonies, and statistical evidence that spoke to the critical importance of the prematurity unit. Isaiah, now stronger but still small, was strapped securely to her chest, a living testament to the unit's significance. The room felt suffocating, a sterile environment that seemed designed to crush hope. Administrator Robert Collins sat across from her, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the documents with a practiced indifference that Nia had come to recognize as institutional armor.
Miss Thompson?
Collins began, his voice a monotone that suggested this was merely a formality.
We reviewed the financial constraints. The prematurity unit simply isn't sustainable.
Nia took a deep breath. The words of Marcus, the homeless man who had become her unexpected mentor, echoed in her mind.
Your story is your weapon.
He'd told her.
Make them see the human behind the numbers.
She spoke, her voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach.
This isn't just about numbers, this is about lives. My son Isaiah was 2 pounds when he was born. Without this unit, he wouldn't be here today.
She pulled out a series of photographs, images of premature babies who had survived, who had grown, who had become part of families and communities. Each photo was a silent argument against bureaucratic indifference.
Look at these children.
Nia continued.
Each of them represents a family saved, a community supported. The cost of closing this unit isn't just financial, it's human.
Collins shifted uncomfortably. The photographs were harder to ignore than abstract budget reports. Nia recounted her journey, her interrupted medical education, the challenges of single motherhood, the systemic barriers she'd fought against. She spoke not just for herself, but for every mother who had faced similar struggles.
This unit isn't just a medical facility.
She explained.
It's a lifeline for Black mothers who are already fighting against a healthcare system that often sees them as expendable, for families who have no other options.
Her words hung in the air, charged with an emotional intensity that transcended bureaucratic language. To her surprise, Collins didn't immediately dismiss her. Instead, he studied the documents more carefully, his fingers tracing the statistical data and personal narratives.
We can't keep the entire unit open,
he finally said.
But we might be able to maintain a reduced capacity partial funding.
It wasn't a complete victory, but it was more than Nia had hoped for, a compromise that meant some premature babies would still have a chance. As she left the conference room, Isaiah nestled against her. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The fight wasn't over, It was never truly over. But today, she had made them listen. Today, she had created a small crack in the wall of institutional indifference. Outside, the city moved around her, unaware of the small but significant battle that had just been fought within those sterile walls. Nia knew that her struggle was part of a large narrative, a continuous fight for dignity, for recognition, for the simple right to survive and thrive. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Robinson, the nurse who had first supported her, heard about the meeting. "You did it, Nia. You made a difference." A smile crossed Nia's face. Not a complete victory, but a turning point. And in this journey, turning points were everything. The early morning light filtered through the blinds of the small clinic, casting soft shadows across the waiting room. Nia Thompson adjusted her nurse's badge, her fingers tracing the embossed letters that spelled out her name. 5 years had passed since the tumultuous days of fighting for her son's survival, and now she stood as a beacon of hope for other mothers facing similar struggles. Isaiah, now a robust and healthy 5-year-old, sat quietly in the corner of the staff break room, his small backpack filled with coloring books and toy medical instruments. He watched his mother with admiration, his eyes bright with the same determination she had carried through countless challenges.
"Miss Thompson,"
called Maria, the clinic's receptionist.
"we have a new patient who might need some extra support."
Nia nodded, her mind immediately shifting into the compassionate mode she had developed through years of personal struggle and professional training. The woman who entered was familiar, young, overwhelmed, her premature infant nestled carefully in her arms. Nia recognized the fear in her eyes, the same fear she had once carried.
"Hi, I'm Nia,"
she said softly, guiding the young mother to a more private consultation room.
"Tell me what's happening."
As the woman shared her story, financial challenges, medical complications, systemic barriers, Nia listened with a mixture of professional expertise and deep personal understanding. She thought about her own journey, how a chance encounter with Marcus, the homeless man who had become an unexpected mentor, had transformed her perspective. Her work at the local community clinic was more than just a job. It was a mission. Each patient was a reminder of her own battle, each consultation an opportunity to provide the support she had desperately needed years ago. The clinic, which she had fought to keep open, now served as a lifeline for families navigating the complex healthcare landscape. Isaiah watched his mother work, occasionally drawing pictures of doctors and nurses. He had grown up hearing stories of her resilience, understanding from a young age the power of persistence and love. When other children talked about superheroes, Isaiah spoke about his mother, the woman who had fought systems, challenged institutions, and never stopped believing. During her lunch break, Nia reflected on her journey. Graduating from nursing school had been more than a personal achievement. It was a statement. Each exam, each clinical rotation was a testament to her resilience. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her struggle into support for others. "Mommy," Isa said, looking up from his drawing. "Are you helping another baby today?" Nia smiled, ruffling his hair.
"Always, baby. Always."
The afternoon brought another challenge. A young mother faced potential separation from her child due to bureaucratic complications. Nia recognized the system's familiar tactics, the same ones she had battled years ago. She pulled out documentation, used her knowledge of healthcare regulations, and advocated fiercely.
These are not just papers,"
she told the social worker.
"These are lives, real human experiences."
Her words carried the weight of her own history, a powerful reminder that behind every statistic was a human story of survival and hope. As the day wound down, Nia looked at Isaiah, then around the clinic, a space she had helped preserve, a sanctuary she had created from her own pain. The fight was far from over. Systemic inequities remained, healthcare disparities persisted. But here, in this small clinic, change was happening. One patient, one story at a time.
We're making a difference.
She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The sunset painted the clinic windows in warm hues, symbolizing the continuous hope that Nia had nurtured, not just for herself and Isaiah, but for every mother fighting against seemingly insurmountable odds. Her journey was a testament to the revolutionary power of maternal love, a force capable of challenging systems, transforming lives, and creating hope where none seemed possible.